Here it is clearly stated that attachment for one thing is the cause of bondage in conditioned life. And the same attachment, when applied to something else, opens the door of liberation. Attachment cannot be killed. It has simply to be transferred. Attachment for material things is called material consciousness, and attachment for Krishna or his devotees is called Krishna consciousness. Consciousness, therefore, is the platform of attachment. It is clearly stated here that when we simply purify the consciousness from material consciousness to Krishna consciousness, we attain liberation. Despite the statement that one should give up attachment, desirelessness is not possible for a living entity. A living entity, by constitution, has a propensity to be attached to something. We see that if someone has no object of attachment, if he has no children, then he transfers his attachment to cats and dogs. This indicates that the propensity for attachment cannot be stopped. It must be utilized for the best purpose. Our attachment for material things perpetuates our conditional state. But the same attachment, when transferred to the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his devotees, is the source of liberation. Here it is recommended that attachment should be transferred to the self-realized devotees, the sadhus. And who is a sadhu? A sadhu is not just an ordinary man with a saffron robe or long beard. A sadhu is described in Bhagavad Gita as one who unflinchingly engages in devotional service. Even though one is found not to be following the strict rules and regulations of devotional service, if one simply has unflinching faith in Krishna, the Supreme Person, he is understood to be a sadhu. Sadhureva samantavyaha. A sadhu is a strict follower of devotional service. It is recommended here that if one at all wants to realize Brahman or spiritual perfection, his attachment should be transferred to the sadhu or devotee. Lord Chaitanya also confirmed this. Lava matra sadhu sangha sarva siddhi hoy. Simply by a moment's association with a sadhu, one can attain perfection. Mahatma is a synonym of sadhu. It is said that service to Mahatma or elevated devotee of the Lord is dwaram ahur vimukte, the royal road of liberation. Mahat sevam dwaram ahur vimuktes tamo dwaram yoshitam sangi sangam. Rendering service to the materialists has the opposite effect. If anyone offers service to a gross materialist or a person engaged only in sense enjoyment, then by association with such a person, the door to hell is opened. The same principle is confirmed here. Attachment to a devotee is attachment to the service of the Lord, because if one associates with a sadhu, the result will be that the sadhu will teach him how to become a devotee, a worshipper, and a sincere servitor of the Lord. These are the gifts of a sadhu. If we want to associate with a sadhu, we cannot expect him to give us instruction on how to improve our material condition, but he will give us instruction on how to cut the knots of the contamination of material attraction and how to elevate ourselves in devotional service. That is the result of associating with a sadhu. Kapila Muni first of all instructs that the path of liberation begins with such association. So this chapter, the glories of devotional service, we see Kapila's instruction, Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Kapila, instructing his mother Devahuti on what is devotional service, how to understand what is Bhakti Yoga. So these are the different instructions that he has been giving to his mother. And in this verse, the instruction is all about attachment. Every learned man knows very well that attachment for material is the greatest entanglement of the spirit soul. But that same attachment, when applied to self-realized devotees, opens the door of liberation. And Prabhupada is writing about attachment in the purport, mentioning how attachment for material things is material consciousness, and attachment for spiritual things, Krishna or his devotees, is Krishna consciousness. One cannot be without attachment. We have to be attached always to something. Now it is our free will to decide what kind of an attachment we want to have. And based on that, based on the kind of attachment we will have, that will be the kind of consciousness we will have. So material consciousness means material attachments, and spiritual consciousness means, or Krishna consciousness means, attachment towards Krishna. Prabhupada, and here in the purport, further it is mentioned that we cannot be without attachment. Prabhupada gives a nice example that if a glass is filled with water, now if you want to fill the glass with milk, then the water has to be out. And suppose the glass is half filled with water. Now milk is something very nice, right? Water is like material thing, and milk is compared to our attachment with Krishna. Now, if you just fill the glass, the half-filled glass with water, if you just fill it another half with milk, it's all polluted, it's all diluted milk, right? So the goal should be to take out the water and fill it fully with milk. That is pure Krishna consciousness. That is real attachment to Krishna. But generally in our lives today, we all are, because we are in the sadhana, we are in the stage of sadhana bhakti, our attachment towards Krishna is all mixed devotional service. Little bit of water, little bit of milk. So diluted or polluted milk, like milk mixed with water. But the goal is how to reach to a stage where I can be completely attached, focused on Krishna. That should be the goal. That is the goal of this human form of life. How to just not be thinking of anything but Krishna, being completely absorbed in his service. That is why Kunti Maharani is praying. We chant those verses in Srinivasa temple. Tvai me ananya vishaya matir madhupate sakrit. Ratim udvatha daddha gange vaugham udhanvati. Tvai me ananya vishaya matir madhupate asakrit. Attachment, she is saying, how my attachment should be towards you, Krishna. She's giving the example, just like a river is constantly flowing, Ganges or any river for that matter, is constantly flowing towards the sea. Now this flow of the river towards the sea, it's very natural. There is nothing unnatural or why is it flowing? There's no reason. It is a natural thing for the river to flow towards the sea. So she's saying, just like it is natural for the river to flow towards the sea, in the same way, I want my mind to be constantly attracted towards you and nothing else. That is a very nice prayer. We chant sometimes, we wish to chant some prayers in front of the Lord. So this is one very nice prayer that we can chant, requesting the Lord that my mind doesn't go anywhere but towards you. Rupa Goswami has a similar prayer. Yuvatinam yatha yuni yunam cho yuvato yatha mano bhi ramate tadvan mano me ramatam tvai. It is very natural for the minds of young boys to be attracted, to be attached to a young girl, and young girl to a young boy. They don't have to go, Prabhupada says, they don't have to go to a university to receive this education. how a young girl has to be attracted or attached to a young boy or vice versa. No. Why? It is very natural. That is why bhakti is called ahetuki. Ahetuki means there is no cause, because it's a natural condition of a living soul, of a living entity. Because his Lord, Supreme Master is Krishna, it is but natural for the servant we to be attracted to the Supreme Master. So bhakti is ahetuki. It is like, it should be, there's no, our bhakti yoga should be ahetuki, means it should be causeless. There shouldn't be a cause for us to take to Krishna. This is called mixing milk with water. Generally we take to Krishna, or we take to any religious process, or worship any demigod, or practice spirituality for a cause. That's not the right state. Just like there is no attraction for a young boy and a young girl is natural. In the same way, it is natural for us to be attracted, to be attached to the Supreme Lord. That's ahetuki and apratihata. Apratihata, because it is natural, it cannot be obstructed. You can't obstruct the love of a young boy for a girl. And in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, further it is said that that's why, because it is very natural for us to be attached to Krishna, Nitya Siddha Krishna Bhakti Sadhya Kabunai. This Krishna attachment for Krishna is Nitya Siddha. It is eternally there in our heart. Sadhya Kabunai. It is not that it has to be acquired specifically from somewhere. No, it is a natural attachment that we have. But we're all talking about it so natural, attachment is so natural, and we should be on that platform. But why is it not happening right now? Because somehow we have become contaminated. And because of this contamination, that thing which is so natural, the process has gotten disturbed. So this is called the diseased situation. Just like another example Prabhupada gives to very nicely understand this this principle. Now, eating food for all of us is something very natural, isn't it? It's not that we have to go and learn how to eat food. No. But when we are diseased, then we cannot eat food properly. So, we have to get rid of the disease, and then we get rid of the disease. It's not that we are learning how to eat food properly. No, we just have to get rid of the disease. And when we get rid of the disease, automatically that natural attraction and an attachment for good food will automatically manifest. It is not that it will come in us, it will manifest, because it's there already in us. So we can just understand the kind of diseased situation that we are in, that, imagine if you're sick and you're not being able to eat for a long time. You'll constantly be thinking how to come out of this disease. You'll be seriously working towards taking the right medicine, following the doctor's advice, following the rules and regulations. Otherwise, we will not be able to come out of the disease. And we are all hankering, when do I come out of the disease? In the same way, there should be a constant hankering in us. Krishna consciousness is so nice, attachment to Krishna is so nice, and I have to reinstate myself in that original position of being attached to Krishna. So I have to follow all the rules and regulations, and Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte Karoye Udaya. Just simply by giving oral reception to Shravana and hearing, chanting Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte, then the heart which is diseased will get purified, it will get cleansed, and Karoye Udoy, that natural attachment to Krishna will manifest. That is the process. So here it is said that we have the same attachment when transferred to Supreme Personality of Godhead or His devotees is the source of liberation. So attachment begins with attachment for Krishna begins with attachment for His pure devotees, Srila Prabhupada. And that opens the door for liberation. Mahat sevam dwaram ahur vimukte. Mahat seva, you serve the devotees, Dwaram ahur vimukte. Dwaram ahu. Ahu means it is said. Vimukte. Vimukte means liberation. Dwaram. The door for liberation, it is said, will be opened if you serve the devotees. And if you're not serving the devotees, Yoshitam Sangi Sangam means those who are gross materialists. And if somebody is serving a gross materialist, or if he's associating with a person who's a gross materialist, Tamo Dwaram, that is Dwaram Vimukte and Tamo Dwaram. Dwaram Vimukte means doors of liberation, and Tamo Dwaram. Tamo Dwaram means hellish. The doors for hellish conditions of life are open. So serving to Prabhupada, and how do we get attached to Prabhupada? It is basically, we can get attached to Prabhupada. We all know it's very simple. We have to serve him, we have to follow him, we have to be sincere in following the instructions of Prabhupada. During those times, devotees, there are many devotees who would travel with Prabhupada, and they would, want to be with Prabhupada as much as possible. There were many secretaries that Prabhupada had constantly kept on rotating, and the devotees, the secretaries who traveled with Prabhupada would always feel, that just by being with Prabhupada and hearing his instructions and understanding the mind of Prabhupada and understanding Prabhupada's philosophy by being with him would give them so much of understanding of Krishna consciousness, and they would say that we would feel attached to Prabhupada. So you would have heard some pastimes of Prabhupada. Once Prabhupada was traveling from Singapore to Australia, and Prabhupada had 3 devotees traveling with him. And so the plane took off, they all put their seat belt, and planes usually fly at 30,000 feet, right? So they were all flying up in the sky. And Prabhupada, the tickets were not all gotten together, so Prabhupada was with one devotee, and there were 2 more devotees who were behind. And they were all sitting and they were flying. And suddenly at that time, the plane, it hit an air pocket. You know what an air pocket is, right? Some low pressure area, low pressure density. And the plane started wobbling and shaking. And it so happened that the plane actually started falling. It was like a free fall. You can imagine from 30,000 feet, if a plane is falling and a free fall, everybody, the seatbelt signs were on, and everybody was screaming and shouting. It was like practically as if they're going to meet death, a free fall of the plane, you can imagine. Children were shouting, screaming, elderlies, young, everybody was shouting and screaming. And Prabhupada was just sitting on his chair, and he was unmoved. And the devotee beside him, he was also surprised how Prabhupada is like this. And that devotee recollects that the plane had a free fall of 10,000 feet. Can't even imagine. Just by hearing it, you get scared, right? So from 30,000 feet, the plane fell to 20,000 feet. And then after that, it became stable again. And it rose up. And then it was like a sigh of relief for everybody. And this devotee who was sitting behind, he was just shaken up by this whole thing. And then he wanted to see whether Prabhupada is comfortable or not. So he came up, opened the seat belts. Afterwards, everything became normal. He came up, and then he asked Prabhupada, are you okay? He was very concerned whether Prabhupada was okay or not. And then Prabhupada was just very gravely sitting as if nothing had happened. And then Prabhupada said, we are ready to die any moment. Actually, this is what it should be. We should be ready to die any moment. Right? We are thinking we are going to live forever. We may die any moment. So, Prabhupada, if we, to become attached to Prabhupada, here it says, Yoshitam tamo dwaram ahur vimukte, mahat sevam dwaram ahur vimukte. If you can just somehow get attached to Prabhupada's, his instructions, his teachings, his pastimes, this is a simple way, being attached to a devotee, becoming attached to a pure devotee, seeing his instructions are so profound. Just imagine, we are ready to die any moment. Such a profound, such a deep statement. This statement should shake us up. Any moment we may die. How seriously are we practicing spiritual life? So there are so many ways by which, attachment to Prabhupada means just meditating, just focusing on what Prabhupada did and what he wanted us to do and how we should be executing the instructions of Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada was a tireless preacher. There was another occasion where, Prabhupada, 14 times he circled the globe and in 11 years, and what all he did, it's unimaginable. Every day from morning till evening, Prabhupada would be tirelessly preaching, writing, reading, completely attached to Krishna, completely focused on Krishna. One day, Prabhupada had been to Amritsar and he had some Amritsar Gita Sammelan. And he had delivered some discourses on Gita, and it was like a Pandal program. And after his talk, he started receiving many invitations from devotees for house programs. So Prabhupada started accepting. It was an opportunity for him to preach. So he would go to one house, to another house, to another house. And it happened for a few days, and slowly, it started increasing. One day there was one invitation, next day there were two, next day there were three, like that. And finally on one day, Prabhupada had 8 invitations. From morning till night, 8 invitations that devotee recollects. And those invitations, so Prabhupada would go, he would take class, do little kirtan, and then come back. Go to the next class, do little kirtan, take a class, and maybe they would offer a little bit of fruits. Sometimes he would accept some juice or fruits and come back. And like that, one after the other, 8 programs he did. Just look at the energy Prabhupada had. And these young devotees, young Americans who were with Prabhupada at that time, they were all in their 20s and 30s. They were unable to cope up and catch up with the pace that Prabhupada was in. And somehow, some of them would just go away, and another team would come to be with Prabhupada. Prabhupada is continuing from morning till evening, but different teams, because they are unable to catch up with Prabhupada. And there were few devotees who would manage to be with Prabhupada, and they were there for the whole program. And so this devotee is saying, so Prabhupada was there from morning till night, and then he reached temple. He went back to his quarters night 9 or 9:30. And then this devotee got busy with something, doing something, so in preparing something for Prabhupada. He thought Prabhupada would have slept. And then he saw at 10:30 p.m., Prabhupada is at his desk translating and reading Srimad Bhagavatam. You see, he was thinking that Prabhupada would be so tired, but at 10:30 also, after having done 8 house programs, Prabhupada was reading books. He was translating books. Prabhupada would read and he would translate also. Prabhupada would read his own books because he would say that it's not my books, these are books written by Krishna, and so I would like to read them. So you see how Prabhupada was. Prabhupada not just preached Krishna conscious philosophy. He transplanted an entire Vedic culture from India, from a Vedic tradition to the West. One thing is, he took the philosophy of Krishna consciousness to the West. That itself is so tiring. But you can imagine how tiring and how spiritually advanced and elevated Paramhamsa you have to be if you have to transplant an entire culture. So he not just took philosophy, he took the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. He taught us how to practice. What is the behavior of a devotee? What should be the values you should be practicing? What should be your dress? When Prabhupada was there in the West, he taught them how to wear dhotis, right? Now at that time, there were no dhotis available in America. They didn't even know what a dhoti is. So they would all have white bed sheets, torn up and worn as dhotis. And the American newspapers would report the Hare Krishnas wearing white bed sheets, chanting on the streets. Look at the struggles and difficulties that Prabhupada had to go through. And in those kind of situations, he transplanted an entire Vedic culture in just a span of 11 years. So if we just hear these wonderful, inspirational pastimes of Srila Prabhupada and become serious in practicing them, very easily we'll be able to develop attachment for Prabhupada. And if you want to understand Prabhupada more, we know what Prabhupada had written. Prabhupada had said, if you want to understand me, read my books. So we should be very attached to reading Srila Prabhupada books, reading his wonderful instructions, and not just reading and applying. Earlier we have discussed this. What is the meaning of reading? Reading means it should affect us. That means we have to apply those instructions in our day-to-day life. Otherwise, reading or hearing has no meaning. It's like a stone. We are speaking so many things, the vibrations are falling everywhere, but the stone won't react. But we have to react because that's the difference between a material consciousness and a spiritual consciousness. Of course, material consciousness can change. That's the difference between conscious and not conscious. So we should be very consciously hearing, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, very attentively hearing, very attentively chanting, and by doing this, we will be able to one day revive our attachment for Krishna. By simply becoming attached to a pure devotee of the Lord, He will bless us, and with those blessings, we will become attached to Krishna. And that is the way of advancing in Krishna consciousness. Here further Prabhupada is saying, if we want to associate with sadhu, what is the meaning of association with a sadhu? Sadhu association means we cannot expect him to give us instructions on how to improve our material condition. No, sadhu is not meant for that. He has to give us instruction on how to cut the knots of contamination of material attraction and how to elevate ourselves in devotional service. That is the result of associating with a sadhu. So Kapila Muni first of all instructs that the path of liberation begins with such association. So we should pray to Prabhupada. So Prabhupada's association is available to all of us, and Prabhupada's association is not just by, the simplest way to associate with Prabhupada is by following his instructions, following his teachings, and applying it seriously, sincerely in our life. We'll end here. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Tatai Gaur Premanande.